So how does hearing aid technology overcome background noise, distance, and reverberation? This is where we have to look at the technology. So now you have to choose what's the right technology for you. A couple of things that I put up here, I did on purpose, because this seems to be something that is easily advertised and easily grasped to compare certain models. Channels, directional microphones, multiple programs, connectivity ability of that hearing aid to the telephone, for instance, or FM or Bluetooth. The first thing that you run into is this idea of channels, right? And how many of you, first of all, how many of you wear hearing aids or have worn hearing aids at one time? Okay? When you got hearing aids, did people talk to you about the number of channels in that hearing aid? Do you remember?
No.
Okay.
That's 30 years ago.
Okay, that was a one-channel hearing aid. With newer hearing aids, you'll get that. You'll get this number thrown at you. And it's a number that's really easy for you to grasp. You'll say, this hearing aid has 4 channels. This hearing aid has 8 channels. This one has 20 channels. That must mean the 20-channel hearing aid is better than the 8, is better than the 4, right? Because it's a higher number. The idea behind channels is that all the sound that comes into that hearing aid, from the lowest pitch to the highest pitch, can be separated into individual chunks that can amplify the sounds separately from the other pitches, and then they're combined again. I'll show you how it works in a second. The benefits to this is that you get a better definition of that sound. It's crisper, it can be a little bit clearer in some situations. Okay. Weird echoes here. A big part for channels, however, is not so much what you get out of it, it's what your clinician gets out of it, because they have greater control for fine-tuning that hearing aid for your hearing loss. So part of channels may actually be something that is going to benefit you. It benefits you directly, but it benefits you via the clinician who's programming the hearing aid. So in this demonstration, you've got 2 sounds that are in your environment. With the hearing aid that has 4 channels, both of these sounds happen to be in the same channel. So you have one set of directions. Basically, every channel has a set of directions. If the sounds come in, what should it do with that sound? How much should it turn it up? How much should it turn it down? If 2 sounds come into this one channel with one set of directions, it can only handle one of them, or it will only handle one of them. It'll handle the louder one, because the louder one is typically the one that's going to be more noticeable to you. So in this case, this hearing aid is going to address sound number 1 much more so than sound number 2. It's already going to work. It's going to amplify or reduce the sounds properly, but maybe not as good as it could work if you had more channels. If that same sound was broken up into more channels, that same region of sound, all of a sudden, this second sound in this channel, this is the only sound there. So that gets handled accurately. Same here, same here, same here. In these 2 channels, there's still 2 sounds coming in, right? A louder one and a softer one. So the hearing aid is still going to work on this louder one, because that's the one that's going to be more noticeable, potentially more disruptive. So in this case, more channels will allow the hearing aid to have greater definition, because it can work with probably 80% of this sound as an individual sound, compared to where here it's only working with this, it's not working with this one much at all. So having more channels allows the hearing aid to provide better definition of sound. It can work differently in background noise situations. It certainly is going to give the clinician a lot more ability to fine-tune that hearing aid, which will then benefit you as well. But I want to make sure that you don't walk out thinking more channels is automatically better, because that's not always the case. Channels help a lot in reducing some fan noise, But channels by themselves are not going to make a hearing aid better when it has 20 channels compared to one that has 8 channels. It's one part of it. When do you say, well, I can go to 2 channels, and how's that, am I going to save money because it only has 2 channels versus 10 channels? Potentially. Typically, the hearing aids with more channels are going to be the ones that cost more. They do more. It goes back to not looking at just one thing. It goes back to looking at what are your needs. Are your needs such that you have to hear in background noise situations, in which case you could say, maybe it's worth going to the hearing aid that can do the job better. And it goes back to the relationship that you have with the clinician, where you feel like the clinician is going to give you an honest answer. This goes back to the trust level. The trust has to be there. Because your clinician may say, you know what, for what you told me your lifestyle is, I think the one that has 10 channels is going to do the job really well. Even though there may be one that has 20 channels. It all comes back to that relationship you have with the clinician. But it's more important than you think. So, when we look at channels, we look at what the hearing aid does on the inside. And you're not going to see that. You're not going to deal with that very much. That's how the hearing aid works on the inside. When we look at directional microphones, we look at something that you can directly control, or you can have the hearing aid do it automatically. Directional microphones is the one type of technology that all hearing aid manufacturers agree upon. There's not a whole lot of things that all manufacturers will say that works, but some things are. Directional microphones is one of them. A directional microphone is one that picks up sounds louder from in front of you and reduces the sounds behind you. Where is that helpful? If a person is sitting in a room, and you have to think about this great art, this is the head from above with the nose sticking out. You're looking at someone in front of you that you want to talk to. A hearing aid that's not directional is going to pick up the sounds in front of you just as loud as the sounds behind you. If it's a quiet room, that's fine. If it's a noisy room, where there's some noise going on, it's not so good. Now, if the noise is coming from the rear, depending on where you sit in a restaurant, all of a sudden, that sound behind you is competing with the sound that you want to hear from in front. And the brain is going to start trying to figure out what is that sound, because it's hearing it. And it's going to take attention from that working memory that we talked about before, and take that away to try to have it figure out what's going on back there, and then you're concentrating more on these other sounds than you are on the person talking to you. Usually the person didn't get softer, it's just there's more competing noise, and the attention goes elsewhere. So now, if a directional microphone is turned on, what happens is the hearing aid is more sensitive to the sounds in front. These it still amplifies. The sounds behind it, it doesn't amplify anymore, so they get softer. If that sound moves to a different area, comes from the side, well, the hearing aid has to adapt to that. It now has to make this direction the direction where it doesn't amplify the sounds as much. So the hearing aid with the directional microphone is going to be the one technology that has been proven by all manufacturers that have directional microphones to be helpful in background noise. Now, directional microphones can turn on automatically in some hearing aids. They can turn on manually in others. You have to reach up and push a button to turn that feature on. What's better? Comes down to your situation.